Welcome everyone to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to stick around to the end of this episode. We're in for a very special interview. Without further ado, Rocky, for anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, John. John, I work with small business owners and I help them to have a growing and more profitable business. That's basically what I do. My background is I'm an immigrant to the United States. I came here at a very young age with parents with very little money, and we achieved the American dream. So we created success, and I just want to see more people be able to do that as well.
Amazing. And Rocky, so, tell us a little bit about your story. You said you immigrated here. Where does your walk to wealth begin?
So it began in childhood that I didn't realize it. Well, part of it did. Part of it is my parents, when they came here, would get together with their friends and they would talk about money, which I don't think is normal in most cultures. Like money is a taboo subject.
Yeah.
In this case, it was not a taboo subject. It's like, hey, how are you buying this? What kind of discounts are you getting? How are you investing? How are you able to do these different types of things? And so as a kid, we didn't have TV back then like you do today with a million channels. You got stuck listening to your parents talk. So part of it, I think, was that. Part of it is I did see a lot of money as a kid from different people, and I knew I wanted to be wealthy. So I was always willing to learn and listen and see what does it take to build wealth and how do I go about doing this. So I think I learned that from a young age, and I always had a desire to have money in my pocket. So even from 12, 13 years old, I went out and started hustling to make a buck.
Yeah, amazing. And so, tell us a little bit about what was it like immigrating here, right? Especially back in times where things weren't as accessible in terms of like information, right? We didn't have, the Google, the podcast, the YouTube, the everything, the TikToks, with the information is. So how was that like?
It was different because I think when I came and when I was a kid, it was pretty much a black and white world. Like you were either white or you were black. There was no in between. There were not all of these other ethnic groups here as much.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, where do you fit in? It's like neither. And so I think that was part of that issue. Now that's changed dramatically over the last, 40 plus years. But back then, that's kind of the way the world was. And yeah, when I was a kid, information was gold. Today, information's everywhere. It's taking action and utilizing it that's the goal in today's world. People don't seem to hustle as much as they used to.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like with all the information so easily accessible, kind of took it away, because part of the pursuit was trying to get that information back then. I feel like that was part of the hunt. Now it's like, well, we're kind of have information overload now. And it's like, all right, now it's more so, where's the good information, right? Because not all money is good money, right? And so there's some people out there giving out bad information that sounds good because they have a way with words, right? And so let me ask you, right, about immigrating here. So were the conversation around money different in your culture growing up than they kind of were once you came here? Did the conversations change or did they kind of stay the same? Like, how was that? Like, I feel like a lot of times people who immigrate here tend to be a little insecure about, as you said, kind of where do I fit in, right? Where, am I supposed to ask for help? I had a way of living back in my old country. How was that kind of like?
I don't think, because I was really young when I came here. So
okay.
I don't know the differentials between what happened there or here. But I saw people constantly having those conversations, the expectations of success. Like, even though we were immigrants, we were always expected to be successful. So I think that was always the case, almost to a fault of, are you going to be a doctor or an engineer?
Yeah.
And I was neither, but it was always that kind of level of expectation. And I think that is one of the things that drives every immigrant group. Many of them have a tendency to focus more on education, more on success. And I think, though, you're self-selecting, because if you're willing to pick up and leave your country and change your life, you probably got a little hustle in you.
Yeah.
And so I think you create that self-selection group.
Yeah. So I just want to touch a little bit more on this topic a little bit, because not too often we get like immigrants to come on the show. So moving here, right? And you said around 12 to 13, right? You kind of started getting it going, right? And you said you didn't really realize it, but looking back now, that's when it started in that younger year. What was that kind of like? You said you started hustling, trying to get a buck. Was it like newspaper routes? What were you doing early on to get it going?
Yeah. So one of the first things I did was I had a newspaper route. And, back then people were blunt. Like they would tell you what they wanted as far as service. And if you did what they told you, they would tip you. And so, a 12-year-old kid making $50 a week. Now, again, you talk about inflation. That's probably like today, a 12-year-old kid making, I don't know, $250 a week.
Jeez.
So it was decent coin. I'm not a YouTube star like some of these kids, the world has changed to make it easier to make a buck. But then the other thing I was doing was I was the kind of like the Five Below. I would go into New York City. I would buy stuff wholesale. I'd bring it back and sell it for double to all my friends in school. So I'd buy bigger packages, break them up and do those kinds of deals. So I was always making money doing that as well. And then just getting a job and working and hustling with that as well. So between all three of those, you brought in some good amount of money.
Especially for that time. Yeah. So let me ask you, before we get into today's conversation, one last question that kind of sparked my mind. You mentioned that, the doctor engineer, right? So my grandparents, they immigrated here as well. And for me, when I dropped out of college, for them, that was like, I was going against everything that they ever dreamed of. You say you didn't end up going the doctor engineer route. Did you receive some kind of like backlash or like, what was that like, taking a road that is, I guess, not as, idolized, I guess, or not as worshipped or whatever?
Well, I mean, I didn't get a lot, but I got a business degree. And, the first question on graduation wasn't like, congratulations. They're like, what are you getting your master's in? So the pressure is still kind of there. But I got a decent job and I started making good money. So from that standpoint, it was not bad.
Yeah.
I just don't think I realized how much was possible. And I think that's the bigger thing, not understanding how much opportunity there is and how much you truly could make if you took advantage of it. Today, it's a lot easier to see that. But at the same point, I think a lot of what you see today is hype. A lot of those people who are claiming to make all that money aren't really keeping very much of it. It's not hard to rent a Lambo and a house for the day and make your video.
Yeah, definitely. And get a bunch of views from it too as well. And then you use the money from the views to rent it again. And it's just like, it's a facade essentially that people just keep on, playing over and over and on a loop, and it gets a lot of people. So I think this is a great place to hop into today's conversation, right? So in every area of life, right? You've been from a very young age, kind of just getting after it, hustling, working and slowly working on yourself, whether you realized it or not early on. But at what point did you really start to consciously do this, right? Consciously, compound and like, of course we're always trying for better. It's kind of natural, but like make an active decision like, hey, yeah, let me build myself up. Let me work on these skills. Let me do the X, Y, Z so that I can get to this place or this goal.
So I think the money side started at 21 after I graduated college. As soon as I got my first job, I literally automated all of my savings. So I had money coming out of my paycheck, going into the 401k, going into the credit union. I had a brokerage account. So after the money came into my bank account, the brokerage account would start swiping money. And again, when I first started, it was small percentages. But over time, I kept increasing the percentages that were going to savings. And so every year you just did a little bit more, just a little bit more. And over time, we got to a pretty high savings rate. And the money that you set aside starts growing over time. And people say, your first 1,000 is the hardest. Your second 1,000's easy. Your first 10,000's hard. Your second 10,000's easy.
Yeah.
Your first 100,000's hard. Your second 100,000's easy. So every time you can hit that next plateau, it literally propels you and multiplies you forward.
Yeah. So let me ask you, right? Automating your finances, right? That idea, right? People in general don't finance at all. People don't budget at all. I have comments on YouTube where it's like, people's like, oh, it's so easy. for, you to say you're, wealthy. Some people have it hard. Some people are working. Some people are doing X, Y, Z. For the people that have that scarcity mindset, that limiting belief that, they don't make enough money to start saving, and not for everyone's situation, but, of course, there's the people that if they stop, spending their money on designer and stuff that didn't matter, they probably would have some money saved up. But like, what advice would you give there to some of these people so that they can start saving and automating?
Well, so I think, especially at a young age, what are your biggest expenses? Housing?
No. At this
No,
age, not yet.
not
Not
yet.
yet.
So,
It's probably a
well,
car right now. Right now, it's probably a car.
car. But
Yeah.
if you don't have housing yet, the longer you can live without a housing cost, the better off you are. I know it might suck to stay home, but the more you can do that, the better off you are. The car is the other thing that sucks it in. And then it's the mindless little stuff. $5 at Starbucks, $5 at Dunkin' Donuts, $5 at the pizza place, $20 at the movies, $30. Like that stuff adds up faster than you can imagine. Money just disappears like you would not imagine.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much you make. I can show you people making $500,000 a year who are living paycheck to paycheck.
Sheesh, it's scary to think of it, especially when you're making that much money. But as you know, money amplifies a lot of the stuff that we're currently going through. It doesn't really change anything. So, what advice could you give so we can start being aware of where our money goes and being aware of where each dollar is spent?
So honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. People make this too difficult. If you make $100, right, take 20 and put it away and don't touch it. I don't care how you spend your 80. But whatever you do with your 80, ask yourself a question. Did it bring me joy? Did it add value to me? Or did I spend it because I thought I should spend it and you wasted your 80? That's a personal question to everybody. Spend the money on what you love and don't waste it on things you don't. So don't be mindless with your spending, but pull your excess off the top up front, stash it away and hide it. That's your best way to do it. So when my kids were young, we taught them a saving system. We would give them their age and their allowance. But here were the rules. You got your money. Out of what you got, $1 went to charity. And then whatever was left was split 50-50. You could spend 50, you save 50. And so my kids learned to save at a very young age. And that saving from like 5, 6 years old till the time they were 18. At 18, they had thousands upon thousands of dollars just from that small allowance. So they built up a couple things. Number one, they learned delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they were taught, like my kids would watch TV commercials. I'm like, you have that toy. Is it that cool? They're like, no. I'm like, exactly. You see that thing? The only reason they're putting that commercial on is they want your money. Don't give it to them. So teaching against consumerism. Mm-hmm. And because our kids were getting their allowances, we were giving it to them in dollar bills. You start getting $200 or $300 in dollar bills, you got a big fat wad of cash. Whether it's worth a lot or not, you start to see how things grow, and just learning that and seeing that over time is kind of a big thing. That's the problem. Today, everyone's swiping. When you swipe, you don't feel the money. It's different emotionally. It's a lot easier to swipe for $20 than it is to pull a 20 out of your pocket and spend it. So the more and more you can go to actually going to cash and actually, because then you're controlled. You got 3 20s in your pocket. You got to give up one. You start to feel, I only have 2 20s left, right?
Yeah.
You feel it.
Yeah. So then let me ask you, because it brings up a pretty interesting point. I myself personally, I like the points and miles game, right? And so what's your thoughts there around, just credit cards in general? Like, what's your advice there around credit cards or debit cards or either or?
I'm not a fan of debit cards because they offer no protection and no real value. I am a fan of credit cards. I don't think most people have the control to control their spending with credit cards.
Agreed.
And if you are not paying your bill in full every single month, and I mean the entire balance, you've got a problem. because interest rates are going up again. Credit cards can easily be 20+% interest, which it does not take much for you to get into the hole and get crushed. And, it's funny because I remember one time I was sitting in a department store and I heard these two girls talking. And the one girl's like, "Oh, I still have $300 more I can spend on my credit card." And I'm like, do you not understand you have to pay that back? Just because you have a limit doesn't mean you should spend it. And everyone says, "Oh, the bank should make sure that they're not giving me too much money." The bank doesn't give a crap about you, right? They're going to come after you in the future. They only want to make sure that you pay them back, but they're going to give you more than you should use.
Definitely. So let me ask you a pretty interesting point, because I know a couple of my friends personally have gone through this, and it's something that I probably wasn't aware of. But so they have credit cards, right? And they got them out, to start building their credit, usually with like a parent or something. And then the parent uses the credit card, and now they're stuck in the hole. Their credit score is attached to it because they're sharing a card, and now they're kind of in the gutter a little bit because the parent used the card more than it was supposed to be used, and now they're kind of stuck paying it off, and their credit score is going down. What kind of advice would you give there?
So why'd the kid give the parent the credit card?
The reason it varies, honestly. Partially, for one of my friends, it was kind of like a emergency situation. Another one of my friends, it's kind of like she still had access to the card, and they kind of just used it, and now they're kind of stuck a little bit. And so how do you bounce back from that?
We all have parents. It doesn't mean we're given the best parents, right? I think here's the reality of it. You should probably know at 16 or 17 or 18 how good your parents are with money because you've heard them argue about it for 18 years, right? So if your parents aren't already trustworthy with each other and their money and they're not good with money, I wouldn't give them a credit card. At this point, lesson learned, shut the credit card off, pay it down. It'll take you some time, but it's a lesson learned now at a cheaper price than learning at 30 at a bigger price.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So you talked about a little bit about starting the process of compounding in financially, right? What other key areas, key pillars in your life is it important to start growing in, especially at this early age where we're so impressionable, we're so, we have so many opportunities still available to us because of our youth. Where should we next kind of focus on?
I think the next one is health, right? When you look around, you see a bunch of fat old people. Yeah, today you see fat young people.
Yeah, which is
right?
Embarrassing but that's another conversation we can get into.
But how did that happen? A little bit at a time, right? You think about it. If you gain 2 pounds a year, over 20 years, you've gained 40 pounds. That's a lot. It happened a little bit at a time. So health compounds both ways, right? Money compounds to wealth and to debt. Your health compounds both ways. And I think the biggest issue that happens, and this happens for both money and for health, at a young age, you don't appreciate it, right? You don't worry about the calories. You don't worry about those types of things. But what's happening is you're causing the damage that's not going to show up for 20 years. And it's the same thing. If you don't start saving at 21, 22, and you wait 10 years, you'll never catch up to the person who did. So you've heard that story, right? If you save from 21 and somebody else saves from 30 to 65, the person who saved from 21 to 30 will have more money than the person who saved from 30 to 65, assuming they put the same amount away each year. So the waiting really puts a much bigger strain on you. So I think understanding what is good fuel for your body and learning to eat well and to exercise and to lift and to do all of that and to stretch. I'm amazed that even at a young age, people are not flexible.
Yeah.
Right. So learning how to do that, if you can maintain that from a young age, you'll grow old gracefully. Just literally go look around at a bunch of 40 or 50-year-old people and ask yourself, is that what I want to be when I'm 40 or 50? Go look around at people at 40 and 50 that look like you want them to, like you want to be and are in the place you want to be, and ask them their secrets. They will actually tell you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like now, so I'm 21, right? So if I still see, I'm still home, right? And where I grew up. I see a lot of people, and not everyone, but some people kind of let themselves go after high school. And I
Mhm.
always say, it's a hot take, but a take that needs to be said nevertheless, because it's like, at this stage, I feel like personally, at least you shouldn't let yourself go till 30, right? We're in the, this is supposed to be our prime physique years. We're supposed to be, using our optimal athleticism and all this stuff. Like if you look in the NBA and basketball, football, right? All the prime athletes are, it's 28 at least, right? Usually it's like when people hit their prime, their peak, depending on what position they play. It could vary, right? But, and it's like people, it's like at 20 are already letting themselves go. And it's like society now is normalizing it. And it's like we're heading into some dangerous time with, health, because people aren't prioritizing it. And if you say anything against it, well, then you're either some type of phobic or, you're shaming somebody. But I wanted to ask a little bit, what are some, in terms of just nutrition advice? You mentioned flexibility already, which is a big one that no one really talks about a lot. Because even me, so I still play basketball, but I'm tight because I don't stretch like I used to. So at football practice, you always used to stretch, but playing pickup basketball now at LA Fitness, it's not the same thing anymore. I still can hoop, but it's like I'm a
Yeah.
little tight now.
So I'm going to say this now. We can talk more. Everything you've been taught in school and in college is all false and BS. It's all just wrong. The stuff
Mm.
come out from the government about health and nutrition, all wrong. Most of what you see is all wrong. Number one, for food, sugar is bad for you. So that
Mm.
means bread, carbs, pasta, candy bars, potato chip, like anything with sugar is horrific for your health. The second thing that's horrible that nobody talks about is vegetable oils.
Mm.
Most processed food is made with vegetable oils. This stuff is garbage. It ruins your body, right? Olive oil, good. There's a lot of like good oils out there.
Mm.
Everyone's told, oh, you eat fat, you get fat. That is the furthest thing from the truth, right? I've had guys on my podcast. The one guy I just had on, I think he's around 48, 5% body fat.
Sheesh.
Okay. Do you know what percent of fat his diet is a day?
If I would say maybe probably like 40%, I'm assuming.
70 to 80% of his calories come from fat.
Really?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
So again, all the information you've given is wrong. Like you can eat bacon and eggs. Don't eat the toast and potatoes, right? Eat steak and vegetables, and you will lean out, right? You will get stronger, and you can eat a good amount of fat. It's really hard to eat a ton of fat and protein. It's really easy to eat a ton of carbs because it's all processed crap.
Yeah. And it's also the type of fat as well, right? Because we don't want to eat trans fats or saturated fat or trans saturated.
No, or
whatever.
vegetable oils. And that, like, if you go out to eat, everything is vegetable oil. If it's in a box, it's vegetable oil. It's not, people aren't making stuff with olive oil. They aren't making stuff with good oils because it's more expensive.
Definitely. There's a study, I've seen this a while ago that was done, I guess, supposedly in like the 70s, which is like where I guess the food industry made a big switch where I think they did like a study with like yogurt or something like that. And they took the fat free out. But what they did is by taking out the fats, they replaced it with like, carbs, extra carbs, right? And so people were eating fat-free yogurts. And then, now everyone was like, oh, so you take out the fats and you're eating healthier technically. And then next thing you know, now we're one of the highest obesity country. And I think I seen a photo from like the 70s or something like that. It was like a beach photo. And it's like everyone looked like a swimsuit model. And now you go to the beach and it's like, it's not the same sight at all.
No, we have grown considerably.
Yeah. So then let me ask you, right? So we're focused on our money a little bit. Now we started to focus on ourselves. We started to get our, physically, right? What's the next pillar that we focus on so that we keep compounding in this life and this walk to wealth?
So the next is your mind and your knowledge, right? Most people stop reading after they leave school, which is a shame. You look at the richest people in the world, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, they read constantly. Bill Gates walks around with 10 books in his book bag, right? Rich people, successful people read, and they read a variety of stuff. And they're not just reading. There's nothing wrong with reading fiction, but at the same point, you really should be reading self-develop, like learn about money, learn about health, learn about psychology, learn about human biases, learn about logic, learn about rhetoric, learn about, how people behave. So it's learning all of those different skills that I think is super important. So that's the next big part of it, is just constantly learning, reading, whether it be podcasts or audio books, all of that type of content. Constantly enrich your mind. That knowledge compounds over time.
Yeah, I think like Warren Buffett reads like 6 hours a day or something like that. He's been reading 6 hours a day of like financial statements since like age 10, and he's like 90 now or something like that. So it's like
he's 92, I think.
Good luck catching up to him.
Good luck. Right, but look at Warren. 90+% of his money was made after the age of 65.
Mm-hmm.
It continued to compound over time. Had he retired at 65, you wouldn't know who he was. He'd probably be dead and he wouldn't have much money.
Yeah, definitely. And so when it comes to our mind, you mentioned a bunch of different skills and areas we should kind of focus on in general. Where specifically should we start, right? Because I feel like when it comes to reading, when it comes to books, like even just look at your library right behind you. Like there's, if you would have put me in front of there, I wouldn't know where to start, right? I see Profit First and 12-Week Year. Haven't read those yet, but I heard Profit Foot. Is where to begin. Like I'm at a point where my reading list now is growing at a faster rate than I can keep up with. But for some people who haven't even started reading at all, it's like, it could be overwhelming a little bit.
It can be. You know what? Just start. Pick up a book that looks interesting, a title that looks interesting, and just start reading. Start learning and go from there. It's funny because some of the influencers out there, what they do is they learn. You have to give people what they want so you can give them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of the influencers go after young guys by, fancy cars and girls and fancy houses to hook them in so that they can give them what they really need, which is the knowledge. So find a book that's interesting and just, even if you're reading 5 pages a day, just start and make a habit and continue to grow. I think the biggest area that people should read are two is, one is human psychology and 2 is money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I agree the same. It's like first, before I talk about the human psychology and money part, it's the idea of the chocolate covered carrot, right? You got to give them what they need, but you got to give them something to attract them so they go in and bite it. But back to you were saying, so I took a psychology class back in college. I hated it. It was Psych 1100. It was just a bunch of like,
stupidity.
It's like I was in there. I was excited because I thought I signed up. I thought I was going to understand people. I thought I was going to be able to, dissect your mind and all these other, psych stuff that I thought about. And it's like a bunch of like, here's the prefrontal cortex. Here's where this part is. And then it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't care about all of this stuff. I'm trying to understand people. And so what kind of books would you recommend for psychology in terms of like, if you have any authors in mind? I know Simon Sinek is a good one when it comes to like, the brain and psychology and stuff like that. Anyone in particular that you kind of read that helped you out with psychology?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Pink has some good stuff. I'm trying to think because some of it is sales psychology. First off, I don't know if you all know this. Every single person listening to this is a salesperson.
Correct. 100%.
Right? So you better know that because you're selling yourself for a date. You're selling yourself to get your parents to give you money. You're going to sell yourself for a job or a business. You're all in sales. Understand sales psychology. Robert Cialdini, phenomenal for sales psychology. Daniel Pink, which we talked about, he does a lot of stuff. Oh, you know what? Honestly, for the young guys, Tim Ferriss, go listen to Tim Ferriss. Tim's got he's got the 4-hour body. So that will teach you how to maintain your body.
The 4-hour work week as well. I read that one.
4-hour work week. So stuff And even listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast will introduce you to new people and new ideas and send you down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Okay. Trust but verify. Not
Mhm.
everything he says is right. Trust but verify.
Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you. So we talked about books a little bit. How important has, courses or maybe conferences played in your life, and or maybe even coaching? When did you start to get into those areas, and how did they impact you and your journey?
So courses, yes. Usually most of what you get in most courses, you can get out of a book.
Mhm.
The courses go a little bit deeper. It really depends. It depends on the subject area.
Yeah.
So there are times where courses are appropriate. Here's the honest to God truth. I know a lot of course creators. 97% of people who buy a course don't finish it.
Mhm.
So you better show up and finish it. Buying it is only the first step. Doing the work is the hard part. Coaches help you get places faster, but you got to make sure you have a good coach, right? If you played sports, some of you have good coaches, some of you have sucky coaches, right? You're going to get a coach. Make sure you've got a good coach. The other thing is mastermind groups. So, I'm assuming most of you all don't have a ton of money to spend. Find a group of 5 or 10 people that have a similar mindset, goals, and desires as you. I don't care if you just meet on Zoom or what you do, but come together and once a week, spend an hour talking about your struggles, be open and honest, give each other feedback, share a good book you read, share something new you learned, discuss things that you're hearing and seeing, talk about these concepts. If you just get together with that group of your peers, and if you can get, maybe an older person or two to sit in on those or join you once in a while to give you their wisdom, you can do this all for free. You don't have to spend a ton of money.
Yeah, amazing. So now we spent some time learning about money. We spent some time learning about, keeping ourselves in shape. And now we kind of went to the mind. Is there any other pillars that, you really want to focus on and, share some advice on?
So yeah, we've talked about everything kind of on the outside.
Yeah.
The real thing is the inner game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your mindset, everyone's got a voice in their head, giving them all kinds of crap. You
Yeah.
wouldn't take that crap from anybody else. Why do you take it from you? And that's the honest to God truth. So I think understanding your inner game. The other thing that's really hard that I don't think people realize, you have unique strengths that are yours that you don't even realize. And so doing different kinds of personality tests, whether it's Myers-Briggs,
DISC is another good one.
DISC is another one. There's Colby, and then the other one is Enneagram. Those are your 4 biggest ones. I would do all 4. They're going to start to tell you a story about you, and then start asking people, hey, what am I really good at that you see? Because what you're really good at, you don't value,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of the world does. So it's figuring out what are your skill sets? Where do you bring value? And then how do you take that and mesh it into who you are as a person and what you do to earn money and what you pursue? That's where you're going to find true happiness, true growth. Too many people are chasing the dollars instead of chasing their good skills and what they enjoy and love. If there's something that you're going to go 100 times harder than anybody else because you love it, find a way to turn that into an opportunity to turn it into income.
Yeah, definitely. I was just the past couple weeks from the day we're recording this, right? I've been bothering my friend a lot because he's one of the podcast listeners. And when I think of my ideal avatar, he's the first person to come to mind. And so I've been bugging him a whole lot recently. Hey, what do you like about this show? How could I help you? Where are you at right now in life? If I were to do some type of subscription, what would you find value in it? I was on the phone with him for almost 45 minutes, just throwing ideas at him. Hey, just tell me hit or miss, right? Hit or miss. Is this a good idea? Is this not an idea? I was should I do Ask Me Anything calls? Should I do a little bonus episodes, bonus content? What would you find value in? And I find myself asking, right, a lot of people I feel like ask, how can I get a raise? My question is like, how can I provide more value?
Yep.
Right.
That's
And,
exactly it.
and that's kind of what I've been doing recently because as I said, I've been trying to just figure out, who is it that that I'm called to help when I kind of am narrowing down now and what's the best way that I can help them.
Rather than asking, because people don't tell you the truth, do it. Do a bunch of each of those things
Hmm.
and then look at the stats. They'll tell you. They'll tell you what people really value and what they don't. They'll tell you what sells and what doesn't.
Yeah. And I think another thing, I don't even know if you tried to touch on it, but one of the points you kind of reminded me is like I think it's the Japanese have a thing called ikigai,
Yeah.
which one of my other podcasts has kind of enlightened me on in one of our interviews. He was talking about, it's like, I think it's like 4 circles, what the world needs, what you love to do. I forget the other two, but essentially where you meet in the middle is essentially what you're talking about essentially.
Correct. Yeah. It's what you're good at, that you enjoy doing, that the world needs and is willing to pay for.
Mhm.
Because that last part is the key. People need a lot of stuff, but if they're not willing to pay for it, it doesn't matter, right? It's not your good ideas. If you just follow what people want, that's how you make the money. Make it simple, make it easy, give them what they want, and they'll give you their money.
Yeah. So let me ask you, right? Because as you kind of already mentioned, people don't tell you how it is, right? They don't tell you straight. And they could say they want one thing. For example, if you're out with your girlfriend, it's like, do you want McDonald's or do you want, whatever it could be, throw in X. And it's like, in all reality, that's exactly what it is that they want, right? And so then let me ask you, how do you find that gap in the industry, that gap or whatever the industry may be, so that you could fill, so that you could start, finding some money? Because it's hard sometimes. As I say, people throw you curveballs. People aren't always as clear as to explain the things that they want themselves. So what advice would you kind of give there?
So the biggest thing is ask them what their biggest struggles are.
Hmm.
Ask them, they'll tell you what their struggles are, or like literally one of the ways to do it is if you pick a topic and you go to Amazon and you look up product, look at all the 1-star reviews and see what everyone's bitching about. Everyone's going to say, this is the thing I wish it was better. And now all you have to do is make that one thing better, right? You can take a whole bunch of books about money. What are they all bitching about? Oh, they're bitching about this thing not being in the book. Let me meet that need. And
Hmm.
you can take any topic and do that. And that's basically what it is. It's just basic market research and then test and see what happens. And things that go well will pick up on their own. You'll see people throw money at you. That's the big, honestly, money is the number one vote. Are they handing you money? If you say, is that a problem? You go, oh, I have a solution for that. Do they whip out their wallet and go, here's $100, give it to me? Or don't they? If they don't, it's BS. And don't ask your mother. Your mother's going to tell you everything's perfect.
Definitely.
So this is something, and I think you all need to realize this. Your parents don't want you to be great. Your parents want you to be safe. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to be safe. They want you to take the safe, steady path. They don't want you to have to worry about things, but that's not going to make you great and happy.
Yeah, that definitely 100% right. It's the risk, right? A life worth living for, or any life worth while, is you're gonna have to go through some hardships, some obstacles, some curveballs, and it's. I think Jim Rome said, "Don't ask for more problems, ask for more skills. Don't ask for less stress. Learn how to manage it better," or something along those lines. Jim Rohn got a lot of those quirky
He
one-liners that
does.
that you could just throw off the top. I kind of wanted to spin it back a little bit. You mentioned the inner critic, right? Whether you call it the drunken monkey or the Jiminy Cricket, whatever you may call it, right? With so much going on in life right now, how do people slow down and get the opportunity to listen to the voice before they can actually start trying to combat the voice and change the narrative that they have, within them?
So I think one of the things that we don't know how to do in general and we don't think about is breathing. And if you look at people, like you can look at someone, you can tell if they're depressed. You can tell if they're anxious. You can tell if they're angry, right? Your body is sensing all these things and you're projecting it regardless of what your mind is saying or your words are saying. So if you can control the body, you can control what's kind of going on. And a big part of that is using your breath to do that. So taking a bunch of quick breaths calms the monkey mind, right? And then focusing on your breath, long, slow. And for everyone, it's a different rhythm. You got to figure out your rhythm. What works for your friend doesn't work for you. Remember that, right? What looks good on your friend doesn't look good on you. So don't try and copy them. Be you. Figure out with the breathing helps because it's like it gets rid of that fight or flight. And that's what happens. When you get excited, you start breathing quickly, but when you can calm the breath down, your body calms down. When your body calms down, your mind calms down. It's all connected. And I don't think people realize all those connections.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of books on that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question is where do we start? Because as you said, I think in a pre-show call, we kind of talked about it. Like a school, and you mentioned earlier in the interview, a lot of this stuff isn't talked about, right? So like, part of the big problem is where on earth do I even find these things, right? What do I search in? What do I look up? Because it's like one of those things, it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, how are you going to search up something you don't know if you're not aware that it even exists, right? So like, where do we begin with some of these things that aren't really talked about at all?
So I think finding good podcasts, because that's where these conversations are happening, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's Tim Ferriss and you listen to all of Tim's guests, go follow a guest of his. See what they're doing and then see who they're connected to. It's literally a rabbit hole, right? You're constantly going from one to the next to the next. You'll start hearing people talk about certain books. So learning, hey, what are the hot books? Read it. Is it true? Is it not? I think some of the books that are BS, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right?
That's a hot take. Let's stop it. Let's actually shed some light on that.
So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Napoleon Hill. Both of those books come out of the same producer. Her name is Sharon Lechter. She's actually the one who does all the promoting behind it. Mm-hmm. She did a lot of the writing behind it. They are those books that kind of do that. Here's the deal. Nowhere in Rich Dad, Poor Dad does he actually tell you how to do what he's talking about, right? He doesn't really show you a path or give you that clear. He opens your eyes, but he doesn't show you a path. Same thing with Napoleon Hill. Opens your eyes, but doesn't show you a path. You got to go find the path. And most of that is actually thinking time. It's taking the time to turn everything off and sit down with a pad and paper because there is a certain thing, just like we talked about swiping a credit card versus cash, pen and paper, a handful of questions. What do I want? Answer that every week. Sit down and, what can I do to improve this week? Sit down and write out and think out answers. It doesn't even matter if you go back and read it, but just that process of asking yourself, thinking through, having the quiet time. Most people are too busy swiping left and right and up and down on whatever social media. They're not thinking. They're being influenced. Never as people have we had so much marketing sent towards us. It's unbelievably ridiculous.
It's like 14,000 messages a day of marketing messages a day.
If not more.
Yeah. Plus the billions upon billions of dollars that these social media platforms spend on learning psychology to target us.
Correct. And even your textbooks, they're actually marketing, right? Public school was marketing.
Good thing I didn't read too many textbooks. I had a great memory, so I was able to pass by pretty easily in school without reading the textbook. A lot of them were pretty dull. But Rocky, we mentioned, talking about three kind of core, I guess, exterior pillars, right? The financial side of things, right? The mindset, right? The physical health. Then we kind of touched upon your inner pillar, right? Which is getting that cricket or that drunken monkey in your shoulder, trying to fix that. What is some like practical advice that you give to listeners, like after this episode, they put their phone down and they can just get right into doing and start making some, some shifts in their.
So the number one thing that you've got to do is you've got to define what you want, or at least the direction you want to go, and then explore and see if that's really true. So somebody says, I want to be a doctor. Do you know what it's like to be a doctor? Have you ever spent a day with a doctor? When you see blood, do you faint? Like there's people who, so make sure that being the doctor is what you think it is and what it is. Create your target life plan. So, you can say to yourself, okay, do I want to get married? Do I not want to get married? How many kids do I think I want? Right?
Yeah.
What area of work would I like to be involved in? What does it look like? Where do I want to live? Right? What does that look like? How much does that life cost? When you define a target, you don't get turned away, right? So if we say, hey, we're going on vacation, right? Now everyone's giving you vacation ideas. You're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do, right? But what if we say, I want to go on vacation to London? Now we've defined our target.
Yeah.
Now someone says, hey, I got a trip to Alaska. What do you say? Not interested.
Yeah, not going there.
You go, how do I get to London? How do I get there? Maybe it's the cheapest, the fastest. Where should I stay in? Like now that you've defined what you want, it becomes easy to start answering the questions. What do you want for your life? What do you want? You can write your eulogy out. Go ahead and write your eulogy and say, how do I live the life that's my eulogy? You begin with the end in mind and you work backwards. Until you define what you want, you will follow everybody else's noise.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, here's the other secret. What you want at 20 is not what you want at 30, is not what you want at 40, is not what you want at 50. It's okay to set the big target and realize that 10 years from now, you may change your mind. This isn't written in stone tablets. You get to rewrite it whenever you need to rewrite it. But if you haven't written it, you're just running around in a maze.
Yeah, definitely not. I was literally just talking to my girlfriend today and I was like, because I'm also a licensed realtor, right? And I've been getting a lot more clarity around myself, like the past couple months. And it's just like, no matter what I do, it's like this podcast just keeps on coming back. And it's like, it's getting more and more evident that this is where, this is what I really want to get going. And because that's going to eventually lead to the public speaking space, which is where I never really want to be. And now I'm in the opportunity where it's like the podcast is growing. I'm starting to get another podcast. And I was like, I thought I have to be, some top dog. You sell a whole bunch of houses for my voice to even matter. And the whole time my voice actually does matter now. And I'm getting opportunities now. So it's like, well, if I can just skip this part out of it, I might as well skip it now because this is what I really want to do. Right. And it's just shifting though. And it was a little difficult at first because I had to put my ego aside because I'm very competitive. And it's like, when I set out to do something, I always want to do it. But it's like also realizing like, hey, like it's okay to shift as well and going with, getting in that flow state some people talk about. And it's like, when I do this stuff, it's like I'm hot. Like I can just let it go. I'm in my zone. So and being able to have that awareness to make that shift was kind of pretty difficult for me. But eventually, I ended up getting it done. And now it's like I'm more focused on this than ever.
And as part of that define who you want to be your wife. Yeah. What are their traits? What do they like doing? How do you want them? So because then it's much easier to judge. Right. Yeah. Too often young people go for beauty. I can tell you it ain't going to last long.
We got a few good years and then after about 35 or 40 or so, it starts going downhill a little bit. But yeah, no, I say that jokingly. But Rocky, you dropped a lot of gems this episode from start to end. And I just want to know, where can we connect with you? Where can we find you at so that we can kind of keep hearing more? You kind of mentioned your podcast a little bit, but where can we find you at so we can keep hearing similar information and go further on it?
Before we talk about me, if you guys like John and what he's doing here, man, give him a like, give him a thumbs up, give him a comment, share this with somebody else who might love it. Give him a little bit of love back to him. Podcasters live in a lonely world. We're talking to each other. We don't know what you're thinking. So be nice to John. All right. If you'd like to learn more about this, so what I do, I have a podcast called Richer Soul. And on that podcast, what we do is we talk about all of these areas. I bring in the best experts and go deep into these subjects. And so we'll open your eyes to different areas and different concepts, and we'll bring in people to share with you kind of more at the level that you can actually take action. It's not like, oh, this is for somebody 20 years ahead of me.
Yeah, amazing. And so, Rocky, now it's time for the final four questions, the way we end every single podcast episode. Without further ado, question number one is, what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
The power of compounding.
Figured.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it works in every area. Just understand it. It's a natural universal law. When you have natural universal laws, just use them to your advantage.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Humility. Like that desire to say, I don't know, and continue to learn. Yeah, the opposite of ego, not saying you have all the answers, just the humility to constantly learn and explore and try new things out.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
One book.
One book. That's it.
That's a hard question. One book, right? I think, at your age, because we talked about this, there's a book called Living Forward. It's a proven plan to stop drifting and get the life you want. I think that would be a good book because it would allow you to define who you want to be. And now it becomes easy to achieve it.
Amazing. And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
So my legacy is my kids. Right? My kids are your target market and they are young and successful, right? They know how to network. They've been to events. They've seen and they've done well for their lives. So that's basically what I'm working on. And these types of things leave a legacy for me to leave for them too, right? They get to hear me in the future.
Yeah, the old man was a cool guy back in his day, right?
Exactly.
All righty, Rocky. Well, I genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I genuinely took away a lot of things myself personally. So I know the audience is definitely going to take away a lot from it. And I appreciate you coming on and just, sharing some advice and, some of your experiences and your stories as well. So I genuinely appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All righty. And that